Imagine you and I are standing in the same room, looking at the same red apple. I point at it and say, red. You say, red. We agree completely. But there is a question hidden inside that agreement that is almost impossible to escape once you notice it. How do you know that the red you experience is anything like the red I experience? You cannot step inside my mind and compare the two. You can only hear what I call the color. And that distinction matters. Because the word, red, is not the experience itself. It is only a label we have learned to use for an experience. So imagine, for a moment, that when you look at a red apple, your conscious experience is completely different from mine. Perhaps what you experience as red feels to me the way blue feels to you. And yet, we could still behave exactly the same way. We could both call the apple red. We could both recognize tomatoes, strawberries, sunsets, and warning signs. Nothing about our behavior would necessarily reveal the difference. This idea has a long history in philosophy. It is often called the inverted spectrum problem. The possibility that two people could use the same color words and respond to colors in the same way, while their private experiences were nevertheless different. The thought experiment is closely associated with the philosophical study of qualia, the subjective character of conscious experience. For centuries, this looked almost impossible to test. After all, consciousness is private. You can measure light. You can measure wavelengths. You can measure neural activity. But how do you measure what red actually feels like from inside another person's mind? Then researchers tried something unusual. Instead of asking people to describe what red feels like, they asked a different question. Which colors feel more similar to each other? Participants were given 93 different colors and asked to judge their similarities. Red might be closer to orange than to blue. Turquoise might feel closer to blue than to green. Thousands of these relationships can be turned into a kind of map of someone's color experience. The researchers then asked whether those maps could be aligned between different people without assuming beforehand that one person's red corresponded to another person's red. The result was surprising. At the group level, the structures of color experience from people with typical color vision could be aligned. In other words, their experiences showed a strikingly similar internal structure. But there was a crucial difference. The researchers did not establish that the private sensation inside your mind is literally identical to mine. They showed something more subtle. The relationships between our color experiences can correspond. And that creates a much stranger question. Is matching structure enough to prove matching experience? Imagine two people standing in front of the same piano. They both agree that one note is higher than another. They both agree which notes sound similar. They can describe the same relationships perfectly. But what if the private quality of the sound is still different inside each mind? Would we ever know? This is where the problem becomes deeper than color. Because color may only be the easiest example of something much larger. Your brain does not receive red from the universe. Light enters your eyes. Photoreceptors respond to different wavelengths. Neural circuits transform those signals. And eventually, somewhere inside the activity of the brain, you experience a world filled with colors. The outside world contains electromagnetic radiation. Your experience contains red. Those are not the same thing. The brain is building a usable representation of the world from physical signals. And if that is true, then there is another possibility. Maybe what you experience as reality is not reality as it exists independently of you. Maybe it is reality as constructed by your nervous system. You and I may be looking at the same universe, while experiencing two slightly different versions of it. And this is where the original question becomes almost impossible to answer. Because suppose scientists eventually map every neuron involved in your experience of red. They map every signal, every connection, every pattern, every chemical reaction. They reproduce the entire physical state inside another brain. Would we then know what red feels like? Or would we only know everything that happens around the experience? This is part of the deeper philosophical problem of consciousness. Science can increasingly describe the mechanisms associated with perception. But describing the mechanism is not automatically the same as explaining why that mechanism is accompanied by a subjective experience at all. The distinction between physical processes and the what it is like of experience remains a central issue in philosophy of mind. And there is an even stranger possibility. What if there is no single correct color experience hiding behind our brains? What if red is not something the universe simply gives us? What if red is what happens when a particular kind of physical signal meets a particular kind of conscious system? Then the question changes. It is no longer, is your red my red? It becomes, how much of the world exists exactly as we experience it? The universe gives us wavelengths. Our brains turn them into colors. It gives us pressure waves. Our brains turn them into sounds. It gives us chemical interactions. Our brains turn them into tastes and smells. And somehow, from all of this, there is a world inside your head that feels completely real. You have never experienced reality directly. You have experienced the version of reality your brain allows you to experience. And maybe that does not mean our perception is wrong. Maybe it means something more unsettling. There may be no single human experience of reality. There may only be billions of private windows looking outward at the same universe. And we call those windows reality. So the next time you look at something red, try asking yourself one question. Not whether you know what red is, but whether you have ever actually known what your red feels like to someone else. Because if you haven't, then there may be an entire part of reality that you have never been able to see.